Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I have a new guest, new friend on with me today. Rachel Bailey is a parenting specialist, and we got connected on Facebook very recently. So welcome. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
This is going to be so fun. So you and I, we work with we both look at the family unit, but what you do is such an important piece of what I want my audience and the parents and the couples that I work with to hear. So I'm going to I'm not going to give you a proper introduction. So let me hand it over to you. Tell us about you, your story, how you ended up doing what you're doing, and then we'll jump into our topic.
That sounds great. So I will start with the present and tell you very briefly how I got here. So what I do is I also am very interested in the family dynamic. I work with parents who are raising children with what are called or known as big emotions. So kids who are sensitive, kids who are anxious, kids who maybe have trouble being flexible. And we can talk about what it looks like to have big emotions more specifically. But I always say if you're raising a child with big emotions, often you just know. That's not even my term. Parents like actually coined that term. You just kind of know. So I got into this totally randomly. I was going to school for clinical psychology, was actually studying to be a neuropsychologist, getting my PhD, but got pregnant along the way. So I never actually got my PhD. When I got pregnant, I was still a therapist at that point, doing therapy for a couple of years. And I realized as I was working mostly at that point with adolescents and teens that parents were unintentionally doing things that made the home life worse. And like with such good intentions, they didn't realize that. So I said, okay, I'm going to start to do parenting workshops, started to do workshops, fell in love with working with parents. This is now 13, 14 years ago.
Wow.
So I've been working with parents ever since. And I was doing general parenting for a while, but I personally am a highly sensitive person. I have two kids with big emotions. So I eventually narrowed down maybe 5 years ago now to working with parents of kids with big emotions. So that's how I got here.
I love it. And this is why you and I connected so quickly because I also am a highly sensitive person. And it is such a big part of why I do what I do. And honestly, just
Yeah.
how I do what I do, right? Like the fact that you and I um, feel things the way we feel that makes us so aware of how to
Yes.
communicate and what we say and how we say it matters because we know how we feel when people say stuff and how they treat us. And so I love that you recognize the need for teaching parents how to understand, and even if they can't relate, because I think that's one of the hardest things, like you can't relate to what your kid might be feeling, but you still have to approach it a certain way. And so we're going to get into so much of this. So walk us through just that, like you said, if you have a child with big emotions, then they know it, but define it a little bit for us.
Yeah. So again, big emotions to me encompasses there is one end of the spectrum, which is like a highly sensitive child. That term was coined by Dr. Aaron, Aron. The kids who are highly sensitive tend to be very sensitive to the energy. They have a hard time when people are arguing. They tend to be a little bit more perfectionistic. They get really upset if they make a mistake, even if parents aren't upset with them. They're really hard on themselves. They are tend to be inflexible. They don't like change, things like that. There are also kids though who aren't so much of a perfectionist, and these are tend to be rule followers. But I also help the other end of the spectrum where you have a child who you ask them to do something and it's always an issue or a problem, or they complain even though they knew that they had to do the thing, or they just tend to want things to go the way they want them to go. And if they're not going that way, you see these big reactions. So, sort of the quieter side of the spectrum is the sensitive child. The louder side is the more strong willed, inflexible child. But really, beneath all of that is a child who feels things strongly. So, that's
Yeah.
really what I work with. Yeah.
What a great distinction. And I love the categorization of it because I think that sometimes the quieter kiddo that internalizes gets,
Mm.
um, I don't know. I think parents don't realize that they need a
Oh,
certain
yeah.
kind of support and guidance to manage emotions because I think the louder you are, the more attention you just draw, like,
Absolutely.
right? And so I think that And then there's those kids that maybe are in the middle, right? Or they experience maybe both, where they
Absolutely.
typically internalize, but then something happens and the reaction is so big and the parents are like, "Oh my God, like what
Yes,
happened to
and
you?"
that is a quality of having a child with big emotions that, like, they go from 0 to 60 and you're like, "What the heck just happened?"
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree, a lot of kids are kind of in the middle of that for sure. Yes.
Yeah. And I think as parents, we obviously, so I have one child, right? And so and there are a lot of decisions that went into just having the one, right? I wanted to be a parent in a certain way. Like I knew myself because I'm a highly sensitive person. I wanted more kids, but then as we got into this journey with our kiddo who's now almost 12, I was like, oh my God, I know myself. I think I'll do better if I just have this. Like if I try to overextend, I'm
Yeah.
not going to be the kind of mom that I want to be. I don't know that I will be up. My big emotions are going to get in the way.
Yes.
And so seeing with him, he is such a blend. Like he's the tough kiddo that also can be so sensitive and gets his
Mhm.
feelings hurt. And so learning for me how to recognize that his big emotions sometimes look like mine, but also can be very different because he's a boy and that just looks different. So even as a highly sensitive person, I've had to learn from him, interacting with him and asking him and all that, what do I need to do to be a better mom? Same for my husband, right? How do we parent you in a way that works for you? And it changes over the span. So, what are the kinds of kind of walk us through the kinds of parents that find you? What leads a parent to say, "Oh my gosh, we need Rachel's help. Like, help us do this."
That's a good question, and it's probably the same with therapy, where they come to me at the point where they feel like they're walking on eggshells all the time, where it's like, I don't wanna upset my child, so I won't ask them to, for example, get off of their device because I don't wanna deal with the big emotions. I don't wanna deal with that big reaction, or I don't wanna ask my child, who's a sensitive child, if they unloaded the dishwasher because I know if they forgot, they're gonna be really hard on themselves. So it's parents who are walking on eggshells, parents who really find that emotions are now controlling their home. Maybe they're like not going on vacation because they know the siblings will fight because there are a lot of emotions, or even day to day, like the morning routine is affected by emotions. So it's really when parents say emotions are controlling my home, I'm walking on eggshells. I see relationships are being affected, including my marriage.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually when they're coming to me. Although they can come earlier, but
Yeah.
most are not coming to me earlier than that.
Yes. And, in my perfect world, I wish there was more built-in support for parents before even becoming parents. Like, I wish we as
Oh,
parents sought, or even, I mean, let's be honest, I kind of wish it was a requirement. Like, you cannot take your baby home from this hospital until you take a basic parenting class
right?
because it's the most important job in our lives. And we have like zero, guidance and
Right.
whatever, that's life. But I think that the reality is, I think in general, we wait until something breaks to go and try to find a solution, which is tough, right? So there are the parents that are maybe more proactive and they're coming to you when they're like, oh, we see maybe that this kid is a little difficult. We need some support. And then you've got the parents that wait till things are so difficult. Like you said, the environment, like the emotions control the household.
Mhm.
So what's your approach? Like, how do you start? What's that first step?
Yeah. So the first step, there are really three things that I work on when it comes to helping a child. And then I also do work on the family dynamics because, like I said, it affects everything. So we
Yeah.
start with, okay, you're walking on eggshells with one child or more. We start with the parent because a lot of big emotions it's a symptom that I'll say this is, I'm using some of my terms and I'll explain what I mean, that someone's yuck is bigger than their coping skills. So I use the word yuck to describe just any type of discomfort because the brain actually doesn't differentiate. So I just bucket it all into this term called yuck. So when someone is uncomfortable, and those who feel strongly, they sense discomfort more quickly and they feel it more strongly. Like there are lots of tests that show that that is the case. When they go into this place of yuck, fight or flight kicks in, and they just don't have the skills to handle that fight or flight response maturely. So in order to help our kids with that, though, we have to be able to do that because if we cannot regulate ourselves, we either initiate or maintain our kids' fight or flight response or their yuck. So the first thing I teach parents is how to become what I call a powerful positive influence so that you are regulated, you are confident because a lot of parents I work with are not confident with their kids. And that actually makes kids feel worse. So
Mhm.
I teach parents to become confident and connected with their kids, that influence, and then we start to work on the kids' yuck and the kids' skills.
That's beautiful because I think so from a therapy perspective, and you know this, a lot of the times the first step is the parents bring the kid to counseling, right? And they want support for the child, which is great. But I find in my experience, because I work with kids and adults, the most progress I've made with working with children is when the parent is a part of the session, right? So when I
Yes.
had those parents that are part of every session, or most sessions, the way that they learn about their kids through the conversation
Yes.
is such a game changer because you can do all this work with a child, but you're still sending them home to that same family environment. And the parent is the leader of that, right? So if I teach you how to maybe develop some coping skills as a child, but then you go home to a parent that does not understand or does not really kind of even know what to do to support you in your coping skills, then the kid is really being set up for failure. And then it just leads to more of that emotional turmoil, whether it's the acting out or the internalizing. And so, what I love about what you're doing is your focus is on the parent because we know that when a parent, not always, obviously, there are some children that need a little bit more, but when, as a parent, if I create more structure in my home, then my child, who is really wired to love structure because that's just how our brain is, like we really adapt well when we have routine and structure. So if I as a parent create an environment that is more stable, more secure, has good guidelines and rules, but also good flexibility and autonomy for the child, then you really can develop a more independent and secure child and relationship between you and the child. And so that's what you do. So
That is
how,
exactly what I do. And you just
yeah,
underscored why I left the world of therapy and working with kids and teens to work with parents.
yeah,
Absolutely. It just makes a bigger difference.
yeah.
Yeah.
And okay, so let's shift a sec. Tell us about the kinds of parents that come to you because I think I imagine you have the parents that are also highly emotional. And so that's part of the problem. And then you have the parents that are like, I don't even understand these emotions. I don't relate to this. So is the approach different? Is it the same? How do you approach it?
Yeah, that's true. I have mostly, I'm gonna be honest, just because I have a podcast and lots of content out there. People who are attracted to me tend to be also like me, highly sensitive, anxious tendency. So those are the parents who tend to come to me. It usually is the parent who is struggling a little bit more to set boundaries, who's a little bit afraid of their kids' emotions. But I certainly have the other end too, which is I don't get it. I don't care about their emotions and they just need to do the thing. I don't understand why they can't do the thing or why they can't calm down or why they're so upset. So I have both. I would say it's probably 70%, 30%, 70% of the more sensitive, anxious,
Yeah.
kind of like my personality. But the approach is actually the approach I take is we do start to think about a parent's influence, and it's more the three things I teach to become a positive, powerful influence are regulation, confidence, and connection. So that's actually what I look at, not do you understand your child or not, because that comes in with my lessons, but how confident are you? How connected are you to your child and how able are you to be regulated? And then that sort of puts them in the bucket they need to be in if they don't understand their child, that comes out.
Yeah. What is does help us understand what a confident parent looks like?
A confident parent sees a situation. So sees a child, let's say, I'm going to use the extreme, a child melting down in a store, like that's like our biggest nightmare, or melting down in front of friends or family. A confident parent, instead of saying, oh my gosh, I need to make this stop, a
Mm,
confident parent doesn't see that as a threat and says, I know what's going on and I know what to do here. And I
yeah.
can stay regulated and out of my fight or flight response because the opposite of staying out of fight or flight is feeling safe. I feel safe. I know what's going on. I'm good, and then they give their child that energy that helps them re-regulate. So
Yeah.
confidence really comes from I know what's going on, I know I can handle it, I know what to do, and this is not a threat.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because like as you were saying that, I was envisioning myself years ago when I remember one time my child did throw a tantrum in the store and I was just like, okay. This is bringing up a lot of things for me. First of all, I
Absolutely.
am a confident parent in that I know what I need to do, but also I was embarrassed and I was
Yeah,
like, oh
that's the
my
regulation
God,
piece. Yes.
yes, yeah. So
Yes.
it's like you're having to do all these things at once. So regulation, tell us about that.
Yes. So we can be confident, just like you said, that was a perfect example, but we're not regulated, so we can't access our confidence. So lack of regulation often comes from triggers. And I always say our triggers are our past, our fear of the future, and our present level of yuck. So just think past, future,
Hmm.
and present. So what we learned in the past, and by the way, most of us did not learn our own regulation skills. We learned that a child on the floor tantruming is a threat.
Mhm.
So we can't stay regulated based on what we learned in the past. We can't stay regulated because we're worried about the future. Well, if I let my child do this, then they're never going to be successful in life. We all end up there somehow. They're
Yeah.
all like on our couches when they're 30 eating pizza. And or our current level of yuck, meaning if it's like I have to just get out of the store, I just need 3 things and I need to get out of the store because I have to do this and that. All of those things will prevent us from being regulated. If we're not regulated, we can't be our confident or connected selves.
Yes.
So that's what I
Dang,
mean by
girl.
regulated.
Oh, and it's even though it's been years, like I don't know, those experiences stick with you because I like felt it. I was like, oh my God, I remember being in Walmart, like that was terrible. And it's like you see you're trying, and that's what goes into that overwhelm or anxiety tendencies, is that you feel all these things at once and you're trying to figure out how to calm yourself down
That's
while
right.
also checking all the right parenting boxes of how to tend to this crazy child at the
Right.
moment and melting down. So, okay, what was your third? Confidence, regulation.
And connection.
Okay, tell us about
And
that.
because there's so much, just to your point, there is so much you're thinking about. What I actually have all parents that I work with create is a regulation statement, a confidence statement, and a connection statement, so that we boil it down to one thing, to like easy, what they can remember in the moment. I have them even make a sticky note, put it up on the wall, so that when they're in this place, like a store, they just visualize and they can. It's much easier than
Love
trying to
it.
think, what am I supposed to do in the moment? Because that will
Yeah.
dysregulate you. So
Yeah.
so the last piece is connection. So connection is ultimately a lot of in the moment parenting is about safety and regulating ourselves. So we've talked about safety for us, working through our triggers, knowing what's going on, but the connection is about helping your child feel safe. And
Mm.
ultimately, children feel safe when they feel seen. So what I teach parents how to do, and that's why this is where the parents who are like, I don't understand my child, this is where they get the most help, because I teach them how to understand their children's perspective. I do an exercise called the chapter exercise, which is taken from books where different chapters are told from the perspective of different characters, right? So
Mm.
same situation, different point of view. So I actually have them do a chapter exercise. I say, take the situation like you in Walmart with your child melting down, write your chapter. Like, how would you describe this? But then let's go into first person, your child. What was going on for them? What happened before they were in Walmart? What happened while they were in Walmart? What's happening in that moment? So getting into their world, and I do a lot of clinical explanation of what's really going on, but I like parents to actually get into their child's shoes,
Yeah.
because even if you know clinically what's going on, you really need to get it. Otherwise, the child senses that you don't get it. So I
Yeah.
teach parents to truly get what's going on for their children.
That is an amazing perspective. I love that. And just like most things that we teach people, these are the exercises you do when you're not in that situation, right? Like we practice and we practice. Like you don't wait till you're in a basketball game to try to practice with your team. Like you're working on this ahead of time. You're really going through, like you said, you have your statement, you know what you want to do, you try to understand. And it doesn't always go perfectly, but you're more likely to be successful if you've prepared for a situation. And I think like most things, like there's patterns, right? So if you do notice that your child has certain triggers, you really want to start thinking like, what do I do if my kid is typically set off by this kind of thing? So I
Yes.
really want to work on how do I approach this? How do I try to navigate it? But also when hits the fan, how do I respond? Because they are looking to me to regulate. So while I practice regulating myself as much as possible ahead. That's where, whether we're journaling or talking it out with a friend or a professional, we're
Okay.
really getting ourselves to a good place so that our focus can be that child. And and like what you're saying is so cool because you have these exercises where you teach, I imagine, just because you have the therapy background and you do what similar to what I do. We spend a lot of time in that practice
Yes.
in the calm time because we're preparing our clients for muscle memory reactions.
That's
Like,
right. Yes, exactly. And I actually call these when then statements. When my child melts down in Walmart, then I will. And we actually create these statements outside of the moment because it's really hard, you know this, to get out of fight or flight once you're in it. I teach strategies for that, but it's really hard.
yes.
So I actually have parents create when then statements for situations where things don't tend to go well. So they know
Mm.
exactly what to do. They have that like little visual cue and they're prepared. I teach what I call long game parenting. And I always say long game parenting is not in the moment parenting. Long game parenting is doing things outside of the moment so that you can have a good in the moment.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And that's everything, right? Like, so when people come to us and they're like, "Hey, I need to know how to handle my panic attack," I'm like, "Well, I don't know what to tell you about that. Let's talk about why you had a panic attack so that we can
Amen. Oh, I
try to
love you.
prevent it." Like, in the moment, there's just no way. Chemically, everything is just crazy. All the lights and sirens are going off, and
Mhm.
it's too much. It's overwhelming, and you don't know how to shut it off. So eventually, yes, we just kind of tire out or something helps us. But what we really have to focus on is not wait for the next meltdown, but do the work in between to support ourselves, support our children. And I think that's the piece that so many parents miss is when they bring their kids and they're like, fix my child. I'm like, that's part of the problem. Like you are a part of this picture. You and your kid are a unit. Your kid in part might be like this because there are maybe some developmental issues, maybe some chemical issues or just behavior, reaction to situations, but also they're a product of their home, their relationship with their parent, all these things. So why would I just look at part of the problem, fix it? I got to look at the whole situation. And you have recognized that the parenting piece is the start.
Mhm.
If we can really support parents and help them build a good home, then it's easier to figure out, okay, well, now we've really resolved a lot of these issues. We've got some good systems going. Now we can see, okay, well, maybe there is a developmental thing, or maybe there's this other piece. So, tell us your perspective and your experience of how these situations and this parenting struggle affects a marriage.
Oh boy. I mean, I see this all the time. So from as simple as, "Hey, Rachel, I'm doing this work. I'm seeing progress with my child. My spouse isn't on the same page. What do I do about that?" That's sort of the almost innocuous question, but then there's also, "Hey, my marriage is suffering because I'm responding to my child's emotions in this way. I see my spouse is not, and I freak out, so I start criticizing them." And then we start to talk about, well, what did your spouse learn about big emotions as a child? What did you learn? How were they dealt with? And there's these huge clashes. And the last thing I'll say, because I actually want to defer to you on this too, is that there's just so much fear from the work I do that if I don't do this right, and there's so much guilt that it immediately puts both partners into yuck, and then they can't communicate, and it creates just such chaos in
Yep.
that relationship because of the fear and the love we have for our children. Then we're constantly in yuck. We can't communicate with each other, and everything goes downhill. So,
Right.
in a
Yeah.
nutshell, but I'd love
Yeah.
your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, and that is such a great explanation. And I think also what I would add to that is, and again, you and I get to think of our personal experiences because we know what it's like to be a hot mess. It brings up our own stuff of like for example, our son Tristan is such a smart kid, thankfully way smarter than me. But he does experience a struggle in math the way that I did growing up.
Mhm.
And if they had tested me maybe when I was younger, I probably would have had some kind of math disability or something. Like I'm good at all these things, but like, oh my gosh, math, I would shut down emotionally because it's like all my anxiety would come out, right?
Yeah.
So I look at him and he is pretty good at math, but there is that piece of him that struggles. And when he struggles, it's like a panic struggle, right? Where
Mhm.
he starts to shut down. So I remember being in a situation where my husband was helping him with homework, and I was looking at Tristan and I was like, I see in him this reaction that I had. And it brought up for me where I was just like, oh my gosh, I would feel so stupid when I was little and someone would ask me a simple question, but my panic got in the way and I didn't know the answer. So now all of a sudden, I became very protective of my kid,
Right.
worried about his whole, like, I'm like, oh my God, if we don't figure this out, he's going to develop anxiety about math and then he's going to be just like me. And it caused this whole thing. And then I remember after it was done, I went to my husband. I was like, you got to go easier on him. He's like, was I being hard on him? I was like, yes, but he wasn't. He was not being hard on him. But
Such a
I
good point.
reacted to Tristan's stuff and I took it to my husband and I tried because I'm really intentional with how I speak, tried to be really calm, but I felt like if I don't control this, I'm going to like come off as like somehow criticizing my husband's approach with our son. And so I had to work on that. That's just a small example, but
Oh,
it
that's a
just,
very typical example. I love that one. Yeah, that it's but yours came from a place of love and fear that you experienced something negative and you don't want your son to experience that. So you were triggered and
yeah,
then maybe disproportionately reacted to your husband. So then he is now like, "Oh, well, did I do something wrong?" Or a lot of spouses will get really angry at that
yeah, yeah.
and then there's clash.
Yep,
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. So
And
typical. Yeah.
yeah, and I think like you were saying earlier, a lot of the conflict that happens in a marriage is that one parent is trying to approach it a certain way and the other parent is not on board. And some of that can be because they relate and they're trying to explain to the other parent, like, hey, we have to do it this way. And the other parent is like, no, the kid just needs to toughen up, kind of thing.
Right.
But then also
Which
I've
comes
had,
from love, just for the
yes.
record.
Okay,
Yes.
go with that. Tell us about that a little bit. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I hear this so often, the kid needs to toughen up. And
Yep.
a parent who says the kid needs to toughen up partly doesn't understand a child. That may be true, or maybe they understand them too well. They were sensitive themselves and feel like they
Yes.
didn't get what they needed. But regardless of the reason, every parent wants what's best for their child. Very few exceptions. So
Yeah.
parents who says they have to toughen up is not doing this to be mean. That's
Mhm.
genuinely what they think. And if a partner comes up and questions that, then they're questioning all that they believe will actually be best for their child. So they get
Mhm.
very defensive.
Yeah.
It all comes from every approach comes from love. So
Mhm.
and when there's an almost attack on that approach, it's like, "But you're telling me not to protect my child." And so
Right.
you get a big reaction.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of an example of a client, and I'm gonna throw this at you, and then we can talk about it. So, I have had multiple examples of this, but where one parent is in the session with the kid, we're really working on strategies, and lots of progress has been made, but the other parent is so has had a childhood that um and maybe just personality that does not really understand that this kid's high emotions should be addressed at all. It is fully they need to suck it up, right? But what we've been like with this client that I have in mind, we did both. Like we gave time and built that connection with that other parent to really understand the heavy emotion, help the child understand the emotion, help the child regulate the heavy emotion, and then also taught resilience and you need to suck it up sometimes,
Yes.
right? So we did a really good blend. But because it's a blend, there are going to be times where parent one has now learned sometimes I just need to go lay with this kiddo and comfort. And then once we've gotten through the comfort, then we go through the, okay, now we need to get up and go do the hard thing. But parent two that is really having a hard time getting on board skips part one where we comfort and
Yes.
just wants to go to part two where we suck it up.
Right.
That is a really hard thing because you're having to help that parent that's resistant deal with their own reason for being
Discomfort.
resistant. And if they're not open to that and they're just in defensive mode, that is
Exactly.
tough. So, what do you
Yeah.
do when you have that dynamic?
So I tend and again, I would love to hear what you have to say because we haven't talked about this offline, but, what I tend to do is teach communication skills. So when you have a resistant parent, I always say the first thing you do is actually get into that parent's world because remember, they're coming from love and fear, and they need to feel safe before there's any possibility that they're gonna shift their perspective. And that shouldn't be our goal. Let me do what I have to do to get them to shift their perspective. I say go in with an open mind and say to your partner, I want to hear what you think. I want to hear why you think they should toughen up. Start in their world and really do your best to be open minded, not listen to try to change them, but listen to be there.
Mm,
And then once you listen and they realize that you're not whatever they're afraid of, you're actually open to hearing that, then they can
mhm.
put a little bit of the walls down. And I always suggest the next thing you do after you listen is say, "May I share my perspective?" Because that
Love
gives
it.
the partner control to say yes or no. And if they say no, they weren't going to listen anyway. If
Yeah.
they say yes, it was their decision to say yes, and they're going to be a little bit more open-minded. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I start with couples who are not on the same page. But
Yeah.
again, I'd love to hear your
Yeah.
take on this as well.
It's yeah, that's you explained that so well. And I think that also, I mean, I fully agree. And I think that it's kind of just basic communication with a couple. The time, the how, the when is so important, right? And so I think so
Amen.
many couples end up trying to have this conversation when they're just coming off of a reaction to what the child did, right? And that is the worst time to try to resolve anything, right? It's always about everyone needs to calm down.
Mhm.
Everyone needs to have a minute to just process and get over themselves because we do have a right to react. Like we have a right to feel what we're feeling in reaction to our spouse or
Mhm.
to our child or to whoever. But we have to get over ourselves. And I've had to, as a highly sensitive person and like a therapist that teaches parenting and does all the things, have to remind
Mhm.
myself I'm not always going to be right, even
Mhm.
though I teach this to other people, other couples.
Mhm.
Like doesn't mean I'm always going to get it right. Like doctors
Yeah.
don't operate on themselves, right? And so,
Yeah.
so I try to remember that when I'm working with other couples, like be open. If you're not open, then I just need you to understand that you're going to be really a detriment to your child. And when you have a relationship with a client and you try to build that rapport, right? So when you build work with your parents, your first thing is I hear you. Like, let me hear where you're not like, well, you're wrong, and I need to teach you how to be a better parent, right? And so we have to reach these parents at a point where they are they feel some comfort with us that we are not going to judge them, but we will nicely call them out if things aren't going well or if they need a different approach. So I teach couples like, look, you have to know if you're still worked up. So what does it feel like to still be worked up? Like, what do you know it feels like? Or how do you know that you've calmed down? What are you
Mhm.
doing? What's your behavior? What's your body telling you? So if you, by the way, you probably hear my child yelling on video games. I'm so sorry.
I don't actually.
Okay, good. Excellent. But learning yourself, regulating yourself, then practicing what you want to say. Don't just go in guns blazing, right? Spend some time. Do you need to write it? Do you need to think it? What is the thing that you want to go to your partner and your spouse and say? Do you want to say, hey, I saw how that went down with our kiddo? And I have some thoughts, or hey, I'm really worried about the conversation I just had with our kid about how he felt about what happened, or like, hey, I know this might be really hard to hear right now, but our kid is really sad because of the thing that you said to him. And I know that you don't want to hear that, but we have to figure this out for our kid, right? And so it's learning how to have a hard conversation, but we're not starting with our kids, right? We're practicing communication skills on a more basic level, maybe working with a coach or a therapist or whatever, and getting to the point where we know, how do I approach my spouse? What are the things that I need to do and say to be open to hearing them so that they're open to hearing me? And then we can start having these harder conversations. So the owning statements, the validating, right? Like, hey, I appreciate how you tried to jump in and help me when our kid was yelling at me. But I want to be really honest with you. Your approach actually made things harder for me because what I was doing was not great in the moment, but I tried not to yell.
Mhm.
I've really been working on not yelling. And when you came in yelling, it just kind of it took us down the path I was really trying to avoid. Can I walk you through why I'm working on not yelling? I'm working with Rachel, and Rachel has taught me about how I shouldn't yell, and I would like to teach you what she taught me. So I try to teach couples how to speak, and I'm very big on write it down. Say it
Mhm.
the way you wish you could have said it, so you're not like, oh shoot, it didn't come out the way I wanted it to.
Yeah.
But then the goal is to really engage the other parent in like the buy-in, like why are we even doing this? And that is where I get stuck with couples where they don't want to. And I'm like, look, you're just going to do
Yeah.
your best. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and there's certainly people who don't wanna change. I always say, though, if they don't wanna change, I find that the majority of people are afraid to change or exhausted to change. I find
Yeah.
that so often that a parent is doing the work with me and their spouse is not, and they bring it to their spouse, and their spouse is just, like, overwhelmed in life, and, like, I can't even get through a day. I can't think about changing my parenting style. So that's another thing I always have
Yep.
parents think about is, let's talk about what yuck that other person is experiencing. Because
Yeah.
until that reduces, just like I say with kids, until their yuck reduces, nothing's going to change. Until the partners or the spouse's yuck
Hmm.
reduces, nothing will change. So we always want to think about, and this is a big question I ask, what's under the behavior? You're seeing the behavior, but what's the fuel for the behavior? What's
Hmm.
underneath? Because until we get to what's underneath, nothing's going to change. So we
Yeah.
don't want to judge behavior. We want to understand behavior.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because that is, I think it's hard for a lot of people because they feel like
Oh,
if they're understanding that they're somehow allowing a
permissive.
bad, yes. And it's
100%. And I
not.
think in part that's because we didn't get this as kids. And I can very comfortably make a blanket statement that most of us did not get this. And in our parents' defense, they didn't get this from their parents, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So we do feel that we're permissive. And that's why a lot of what I talk about is kids with big emotions actually need a confident parent who can be firm. So this is
Yeah.
not about being permissive. We can be
Mhm.
confident and connected at the same time. The connection is the understanding, but the confidence is about I have like to your point earlier, structure, boundaries, firmness. Otherwise, I have a whole podcast episode on kids don't actually want to be in charge. Strong-willed kids look like they do, they don't.
Mhm.
When we are not confident, this has nothing to do with being permissive. This has to do with being firm, but understanding why our children struggle with our limits and boundaries and giving them what they need to be successful. Same with a spouse. Saying, "This is how I want to parent." If you're not able to, I really want to understand why. Are you exhausted? Are you afraid? Are you what's going on for you?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that it's kind of that big emotion thing all over again, right? So I'm strong-willed because I have a hard time managing my emotions. But when you help me manage my emotions, I am more stable and more well-adjusted, right? And that's the same for adults. Like that's why we call that friend that's going to tell us that we need to calm down or helps us calm down. And that's why we look for support because we don't want to be stuck in that crazy, right? But we need someone else. And as a child, who's that person? It's your parent.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
difficult.
Yeah. And most of the behaviors that we see in ourselves and our kids are really just unhealthy coping mechanisms. Like you said, inflexibility, which I work with all day, every day. Inflexibility in a child and adult is a sign that someone's struggling.
Yeah.
When the more chaotic we feel inside, the more inflexible we become.
Mhm.
So if you see inflexibility in somebody, it's because they're struggling inside. And
Yeah.
that's why we teach. I mean, I certainly teach flexible thinking skills to kids, but it's really about let's figure out why they're feeling this way. Just to your point you said earlier, why are they feeling that way to begin with?
Yeah.
Why do they have to be so uptight and inflexible? And I am by nature an uptight and inflexible person, so I can speak to this
Yeah.
directly. But when I feel safe, I'm very flexible. I really
Yeah.
am. I can go with the flow. It's just my body tends not to feel that way most of the time.
Right. And think of how hard it is for us as adults to retrain our brain, and we're expecting
Man.
kids to just like go with it,
Right?
like I told you, why aren't you listening? And I've had parents that have expectations of their children that are very developmentally inappropriate. Like the brain development does not allow for that kind of functioning, or B, emotionally speaking, they are not developed. Like they might be 13, 14, in their chronological age or developmental age, but emotionally, they may be stunted or something may have happened that has really gotten them stuck. But that inflexibility in a parent's perspective can be so just it can create an obstacle to that connection, right? And if our kids
Absolutely.
do not feel connected with us, why would they trust us? Why would they let us help them? They
They
won't.
won't.
And you and I aren't saying like, well, it's the parents' fault and parents suck. I
No.
mean, we're parents and we get it wrong all the time, but we try. Like if I ever get to a point where I just dig my heels in and I'm like, well, my kid is just going to get on board and absolutely do everything I tell him to do and I don't care what they think about it. I would be such a terrible mom because
Mhm.
I would hate it if someone came to me and said that. Like, would you
Mhm.
get on board with any boss or even a friend that was like, well, we're going to do what I want to do every single time we hang out? You'd be like,
Mhm.
screw that. Like, I don't want to be friends with
Mhm.
you anymore. Right. So, how can I expect my child to respect me and connect with me if I don't take into account their identity, their personality? However, there are rules. I am absolutely the parent. I'm absolutely the
Yeah.
authority. I will create rules that are safe for you, and I will do things that piss you off. And I tell my kid this all the time. If I'm not pissing you off sometimes, then I'm probably not a good parent, right?
Agreed. Yeah.
But I also still will sit and talk to you and like I play video games. Like I try to be the cool gaming
Mhm.
mom. I sometimes succeed, sometimes
Mhm.
not. But like I'm in his world. I know what he's doing. I try to know about the drama at school and the friendships
Mhm.
and his emotional stuff. But then at the same time, I know when to let him make those decisions and how to learn to self-regulate. I teach him because I want him to be a functional adult. But if all I do is squash his little spirit, then he just grows up to be a dysfunctional adult.
Absolutely, and that's why we have to be able to balance that I am in charge and I've got this, and you're not a threat to me. I've got this
Yeah.
with the connection. We have to be able to do both. And the good news is it's actually fairly easy to do both.
Yeah.
And if we talk about setting expectations, I would love to give one really practical tip. I just did a podcast episode on this, so it's top of mind. It was like last week's episode. A lot of parents will say, well, how do I know what's appropriate? How do I know it's developmentally appropriate? And there's such an easy way to determine if your expectations are realistic. Just say this to yourself, two questions. Number one, what am I expecting my child to do? For example, I'm expecting them to do their homework without questioning. I'm expecting them to stay in bed if they're younger. Second question, really easy. Do they consistently do what I want them to do right now? Do they consistently do that? If the answer is no, your expectation is not realistic yet.
Beautiful.
So it's really easy. If you
Yep.
want them to do something and they're not, and they're
Yep.
consistently not, they can't do it yet. So that's where I come in and I say, okay, what are they missing that allows them to do that? But it's really easy. We don't have to know all the clinical stuff that maybe you and I know to see if we're setting realistic expectations. If they can't do it yet, they can't do it. And if you keep trying to make them do it, it's only going to ruin your relationship and lower your
Yes.
influence.
Yeah, I love that, especially because I think it really gives you control as a parent, right? Because I think it's so easy to feel frustrated and lack of control in the sense that we can't make, quote unquote, make our kids do what we want them to
Right.
do. But really, what it comes down to is okay, let me. Let's take a step back. Like, as a parent, I now know I can go and teach a skill or have a
Exactly.
conversation. And if I do this, then we're all happy. Like, yelling at my kid for not doing his homework when I tell him to, what is that going to do other than just disrupt our relationship and cause more conflict, right? And so if I say, hey, I'm going to sit down. I know you're having a hard time doing homework. So here's what we're going to do. You get home. How much time do you think you need to be able to de-stress before, we sit down and do homework? Oh, okay. An hour? Great. You should probably have a snack, right? You want a snack? Okay. So when you come home, you're going to sit and hang out for an hour, maybe play your video game, have a snack. And then should we set an alarm? Let's set an alarm. So 15 minutes before it's time to get up and do our homework or your homework, an alarm is going to ring, and that's going to tell you that you need to wrap up what you're doing. And then we're going to set another alarm for the time that you need to stop. And when that goes off, you and I are both going to go sit down. I'm going to grab a snack because I'm going to be hungry. You're going to grab a snack if you still want one. We're going to sit down and we're going to do homework together. What do you think? 30 minutes? Okay, let's just do 30 minutes and then we'll take a break and then we'll do another 20 minutes. But we're going to do it together. And then when we take a break, we're maybe going to go play a board game and whatever. Like, depending on your
Mhm.
kid and where they are in their age, create a plan, create a system, participate as much as you can in the plan, and then say, hey, how about today you sit down and do your homework by yourself? I don't think you need me. You've got this. It's this math worksheet. You know what you're doing. I'm going to be over here. I'm going to go do some work or I'm going to go start dinner. And then we've now created a system instead of me just yelling at my kid to turn his video game off to go do his homework, where now I'm frustrated, he's frustrated, and we have a really awful night.
Absolutely. It's these skills that they're missing. And here's the way that you're describing it and the way I teach it too is in order for your kids to be open to that conversation, you have to be what I call a powerful positive influence. That's what I talked about in the beginning. And then once you have that influence and you have that conversation, your child is actually going to engage. So if your child is not engaging, you kind of have to work on your influence. And then you give them the skills. So, for example, just to go along with your homework example, a lot of kids struggle with things like this is kind of a fancy term, but like task initiation. So, just
Mm.
getting started, they're executive functioning skills that kids are missing. They
Yep.
genuinely don't have these skills. And once we're a powerful positive influence, one of the things I tell parents to do is say, what do you hate about doing homework? Because often when kids say, like, I'm doing something else, or I don't know how to get started, or I hate getting started, to me, that gives a sign of these executive functioning skills that are missing.
Yes.
And when we are an influence and we give our kids these skills, I used to go into the home in the very beginning of my career. I'd go into people's homes and they'd be like, Rachel, are you a magician? I'm like, no, I'm not a magician. I just understand the brain and I understand relationships. When
Mhm.
you have a good relationship with your child and you give them the skills they need, it's like their behavior changes. So
Yep.
if their behavior doesn't change, one of those things is missing.
Yep.
That's all it is. It's really a simple formula. Are you an influence? Do they have too much yuck? Do they have the executive functioning skills?
Yeah.
One of those things is missing, you're going to see negative
Hmm.
behavior. But if they're not, behavior, the moods, the attitudes, the energy, the emotions change.
Yeah. And I think, like you said earlier, get to know the struggle. Like, what is going on? What is the why? Right. And so, if you tell your kid to go clean up their room and it's kind of overwhelming, well, then their anxiety is it's too much. Where if you
Absolutely.
just say, go make your bed, one thing. It's a
Yeah.
smaller, more achievable task because we as adults get overwhelmed with all the tasks.
Mhm.
But I think we forget to have compassion for our children. We forget that they are just mini humans who have all the
And not
same
many adults.
problems.
They're not little adults.
No, no, and
Yeah.
no amount of you telling them what to do is going to teach. We have to show, we have to practice the same way you drag your kid to practice, soccer practice every week and you don't let them miss. You need to be a part of the practice of life and how to
Yeah.
do the things that we're asking them to do to run a functional home or school life or whatever. But I think we forget. And then also, when you have more than one child, you have
Yeah.
to
Of
remember
course.
that, first of all, you're busier, you have more
Yeah.
things to do, but also, and back to what you said when we were little, I think the idea was this is how we parent. I parent every kid the same way. Well, it doesn't work that way because I
Mhm.
have very different personality than my brothers. I have two
Yeah.
brothers, and we are all very different. And I think that parents don't love the idea of tailoring their parenting style to their child because it feels very permissive, when
Mhm.
really it's just being an individual. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Oh, I 100% agree. I started with in the world of ADHD and kids with learning struggles, and one of the first things that I learned to teach parents and to teach kids is that fair is not equal. Fair is
Mm,
not equal. Fair is giving every child what they need. So it's basically imagine you have a child, one child is blind and one child is not, and you say, well, I'm going to treat you equally. I'm not going to give either of you glasses, or I'm not going to give either of you what you need. The blind child won't be able to read,
mm,
so you
mhm.
have to tailor to what they need. Now, I also just want to emphasize something you said before is that we can't feel guilty or like failures. Most people when they come to me are feeling like, "Oh my gosh, I've heard your podcast. I'm doing everything wrong. I
Mhm.
don't know what my child is missing." The truth is that all you need to know is that something is off. You're a good parent. You just need a little bit of an
Yeah.
instinct. You don't have the education. You don't have the childhood experience to be able to do something different. So it's we really need to with parents be very clear. We're not blaming anybody. You said
Mhm.
that before too. We're not blaming anybody. We didn't get what we needed. And here's sort of that manual. We can provide a little bit of it as much as could exist to tell
Mhm.
you to help you understand your child. But it's not it's not what parents' fault.
Right. Yep. But it's also important to be open to growth and change, right?
Exactly. It's not our
Which is
fault,
so
but it is our
important.
responsibility. How's that?
Yes, I love it. Okay, I'm mindful of our time. So, just kind of wrapping up the piece on the marriage, just because that's, more of
Mhm.
the, I want to highlight that. So, the reason that I am so excited about this conversation is because parenting is you have a kid, it is a full-time job. There
Yes.
is no escaping it. It doesn't matter how many other things you have in life that are going on. You have to parent. You don't get to say, well, I don't have space for that today. I'm not going to do it. Right. And so, and it's the same with your marriage. And I think so much of the time couples get so um I don't know, the parenting piece can take up, especially when you have a kiddo that's you're struggling with, like it takes so much of your time and energy that it is easy to lose track of your marriage.
Mm,
And whether you're on the same page or not, I mean, there are parents who are approaching the parenting thing very similarly. They're great, they're very unified, but they still are exhausted in a way that it really kind of takes away from their ability to connect as a couple. And what I love about what you do is that you're giving parents hope that here, let me help you with this big piece that's taking so much of your mental and emotional, spiritual everything away so that we can make more room for your marriage where you can be proud of yourselves that you came to a professional together to support your child. Because by doing that, it does strengthen you as a couple. It makes you more unified. It
yeah.
helps you be a better role model couple for your child for their future. And so, even though your focus is the parenting, you're, like you said, you're doing the whole family piece. And that is so important because parents are both equally responsible, even if there's more of like a primary caregiver or like the default parent
Default
kind of
parent.
idea. Yeah. We're still very much involved, and we both need to know how to be in a relationship with our child. And that includes structure, discipline, all the things. And so I love what you do. And I'm so excited that you and I are connected now, because I think that there's going to be a lot more that we can do together,
Oh, yes.
and we can collaborate on stuff. So before we wrap up, tell us about where people can find you. You've got a podcast, you've got a program. Walk us through all of that.
So my website very easily is rachel-bailey.com. I'm not on social media that much, to be honest. I have a YouTube channel, but I'm not on social media that much because I just work so much with my clients. But I also have my podcast. That's really where I'm communicating the most. And that is called Your Parenting Long Game. And
Love
it
it.
really is starting with episode 200. I have a lot of episodes. Starting with episode 200, I focus on raising kids with big emotions, a lot of the topics we talked about it today, and a lot of practical tools for how to raise a child with big emotions. And then I do have programs where I walk people through how do you make this look in your home. I do a lot of hybrid one-on-one work because I actually like working one-on-one, but I have a lot of families that I support. So I have some programs where I can give you some one-on-one support, but also some group support. So
Wow.
that's kind of what I
Tell
provide.
us about you were telling me off line that you have like a monthly live course.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's there are a lot of things that I do, which is again why I'm not so great about social media. But one of the things that I do is I work with guest experts like you. I think this is what you were talking about, bringing in experts where their audience can ask me questions because your audience may have more questions after this. And then my audience can ask you questions. So I actually allow, it's like an opportunity for all parents, not just to get my thoughts, but other experts. So that's one of
Mm,
the things that I do absolutely to
so
just
cool.
get in front of as many parents as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have worked with so many parents, and you still do. And
Mhm.
so I love, like you were telling me off cam, how just how big your community is that you've worked with. And I love that because it gives me so much hope for just children, that there are so many parents that are reaching out to you, wanting your support, taking it and implementing it. And that is such a gift as parents that we give our children, is really trying to be better parents, a better united couple, whether we're in a marriage or single parents. Like, the biggest gift we can give our parents is intentional parenting, or give our children is intentional parenting. And I love that you teach that. So, and we're going to plug our little thing.
Yes.
I'm going to come on your live in
Mhm.
July. So we
Mhm.
will blast that everywhere once it's ready
Absolutely.
to go.
Absolutely. I'm very excited for that conversation too.
Gonna
Yeah.
be so cool. All right. Thank you so much for being on with me. I have really enjoyed talking to you, and I look forward to our next one. So I will put your website and everything in the show notes so that people can find you. And again, thank you for coming on with me.
Thank you. I'll also give you a free resource. If anyone wants more
Ooh,
information before July, I'll give you a
yes.
resource that goes with that information too. You can put it in your show notes.
I
So
love it.
thank you so much for having me though. It was really a pleasure to be here to talk to you.
Thank you. All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.